So much for joining us. So tell us what you say, very reliable law enforcement source told you about a possible suspect in the case.
Sure. So after almost 4 decades in this business, I've collected a few friends at the FBI and in local law enforcement all over the country. And the source that I have is impeccable. And he said that not only were the cameras smashed, plural cameras smashed, so that the suspect likely knew about the locations of them, but that the car belonging to the sister of Savannah Guthrie, Annie Guthrie, was towed, impounded, and taken into evidence. And that, and this is the wording, it's very important. The wording is very important. He said they now believe the son-in-law may be the prime suspect. Those are the words. Son-in-law may be the prime suspect at this point.
The family has been cleared. That is the official position of the Pima County Sheriff's Department, stated publicly, on record. February 16, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos stood before cameras and told the world that the Guthrie family, all siblings, all spouses, had been eliminated as possible suspects in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Clear, done, move forward. But here is what happened 10 days after that clearance. The car Tomaso Chioni drove Nancy Guthrie home in on the night she disappeared was still sitting in a forensic evidence lot. Not returned, not released, still being processed. Still, in the words of the Pima County Sheriff's Department itself, part of the investigation. That is not a procedural footnote. That is a documented contradiction between what the public was told and what investigators were actually doing. And it is not the only one. There are seven publicly verified facts drawn entirely from the public record, confirmed by named journalists, named officials, documented timelines that connect Tomaso Chioni to the events of February 1, 2026, in ways that have never been explained. 7 gaps between the official statement and the documented evidence. None of them closed, none of them answered. That is what this video is. Before continuing, the record needs to be clear. Tomaso Chioni has not been charged with any crime. He has not been arrested. He has not been named as a suspect by any law enforcement agency on the record. On February 16, 2026, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos issued a public statement that the Guthrie family, and that includes Tomaso Chioni, had been cleared as possible suspects in this case. That clearance is real. It is documented. It is the official position of the lead investigative agency. But on February 3, 2026, 13 days before that clearance, veteran journalist Ashley Banfield, a reporter with 36 years of experience across CNN, HLN, News Nation, and Court TV, went public on her podcast Drop Dead Serious, citing a senior law enforcement source with direct knowledge of the investigation. That source told her Tomaso Chioni may be the prime suspect. Not was. May be. That framing was deliberate, and Banfield said so on air. After February 16th, Banfield did not retract. Her source did not recant. The reporting stands. When a senior law enforcement official inside an active investigation names someone as a possible prime suspect and then maintains that position even after a public clearance, the gap between the official statement and the investigative behavior deserves examination. What follows is 7 documented facts from the public record. Every claim is sourced. Every question raised is genuinely unanswered. This is not a verdict. This is not an accusation. This is the record assembled in one place in order. Decide what it means. On the evening of January 31, 2026, Nancy Guthrie had dinner with her daughter Annie and Annie's husband, Tomaso Chioni. According to Sheriff Chris Nanos, at the conclusion of that dinner, Tomaso drove Nancy home. He waited. He confirmed she was inside. The garage door closed at approximately 9:50 p.m. That is the last confirmed moment any person can place Nancy Guthrie in the living world. By 11:00 the following morning, she was gone. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, Nancy's doorbell camera was disconnected. not a power failure. Disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., a motion sensor detected someone on the property. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with her phone. Investigators believe that timestamp marks the moment she was taken. The critical window is 41 minutes, from 1:47 a.m. to 2:28 a.m. In every missing persons investigation, there is a foundational principle. The last person confirmed to have seen the victim alive is the first person investigators clear, not with a statement, but with a verified, documented alibi placing them somewhere else during the window when the crime occurred. Sheriff Nano stated the family was cleared. He did not reference phone records placing Tomaso elsewhere during those 41 minutes. He did not cite surveillance footage from another location. He did not produce a witness verifying Chioni's whereabouts. He issued a statement. Where was Tomaso Chioni between 1:47 and 2:28 a.m.? And what documented evidence places him somewhere other than Nancy Guthrie Street? On February 16th, Sheriff Nanos made his position plain. The vehicle had been processed as standard procedure, pulled from the scene, examined under court order. And then, in the same statement, he declared the Guthrie family cleared as possible suspects. 10 days later, the evidence processing had not stopped. On February 26th, crime journalist Brianna Whitney reported the vehicle. The car Tomaso drove Nancy home in remained in the forensic evidence lot, still held, still examined. When reporters pressed the department, the response confirmed what the clearance hadn't resolved. The vehicle is still part of the investigation. The family has been cleared. The car has not been released. There are innocent explanations. Forensic processing takes time regardless of ownership, but follow the logic. If investigators believe the suspect interacted with that car, they believe the suspect knew which car to target, which means they knew Nancy had just been dropped off, which means they were tracking her movements, which means this was not random. Nancy Guthrie was chosen. Her arrival home was known. First emotional reference. Who, on the night of January 31st, knew Nancy had just gotten home at 9:50 p.m., and how did they know it? The sequence of events in the first 2 weeks of February matters. Not any single event, the sequence. February 3rd, Ashley Banfield publishes on Drop Dead Serious. 36 years of journalism across CNN, HLN, News Nation, Court TV. She cites a senior law enforcement source with direct access to the investigation. 2 claims. A vehicle belonging to Annie Guthrie had been towed and impounded, and investigators now believe Tomaso Chioni may be the prime suspect. Banfield was precise about that word. May. She repeated it deliberately. February 4th. The Sheriff's Department denies everything to TMZ. No suspect, no vehicle confirmation, unsure where the reporter is getting her information. February 7th. Law enforcement arrives at Annie and Tomaso's home. Consented search, no warrant required. Deputies inside for nearly 3 hours. Former CIA officer and FBI Special Agent Tracy Walder told People magazine the equipment carried out was consistent with forensic evidence collection tools. White cases, brown bags, 3 hours. February 10th. The department posts publicly that investigative activity at the Guthrie residences will continue that night and into the following day. 6 days before the clearance. After Banfield named Tomaso, investigators moved toward him, not away. A 3-hour search, evidence bags. A public announcement of continued activity, then clearance. What was collected during that search? And what shifted the investigation from activity will continue to family is cleared in 6 days? If this breakdown has held your attention through 3 of the most sourced and documented details in this case, hit like. This sequence, exact dates, exact statements, exact contradictions, does not exist assembled this way anywhere else. Share it if real answers matter to you. 4 more details. Let's continue. According to Ashley Banfield's law enforcement source, it was not only the front door camera compromised on February 1st. Multiple cameras, multiple locations, disabled systematically before the crime was committed. Whoever entered that property did not improvise. They knew where to go. They knew what to disable. They knew the sequence. The doorbell camera went dark at 1:47. The operation was completed by 2:28 a.m. That precision requires knowledge. Specific, location-specific knowledge of where cameras are mounted and how they are powered. There are 3 ways someone acquires it: prior physical access to the property, extensive external surveillance, or being told by someone familiar with the layout. The first category means someone who had been inside Nancy Guthrie's home, someone who walked past those cameras without thinking twice about it. Tomaso Chioni was married to Nancy's daughter. He had been inside that house an unknown number of times over an unknown number of years. He drove her home that night. He watched the garage door close. He would know the security layout. That does not make him responsible for what happened 4 hours later, but it places him, by simple history and proximity, in the first category of people who would have that knowledge without ever surveilling the property from outside. Has law enforcement publicly stated whether the camera disablement pattern was consistent with prior interior knowledge of the property? On February 12th, the FBI released the physical description of the masked suspect from the doorbell camera footage. Male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10", average build, masked, gloved, carrying a black 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack. Independent investigative journalists tracking the case noted publicly that questions exist around whether Tomaso Chioni's physical profile is consistent with or contradicts that description. No official source has confirmed the specifics. The range is broad. 5'9" to 5'10", average build, covers a significant percentage of adult males. Without knowing whether Chioni falls measurably outside that bracket, the description neither eliminates him nor implicates him. If his profile falls clearly outside the range, that is meaningful exculpatory evidence, and it should have been stated when the clearance was issued. If his profile falls within the range, the description does not eliminate him, and the clearance rests on something else entirely. The sheriff cleared the family. He did not state whether Tomaso Chioni's physical characteristics matched or contradicted the FBI description of the masked suspect. Has any official confirmed on the record whether Chioni's physical profile is consistent with or excluded by that description? And if physical evidence cleared him, why wasn't that stated? Unknown male DNA was recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home. The same DNA appeared on a glove found 2 miles away. It does not match any profile in CODIS, the FBI's national database. Sheriff Nanos stated it does not match the Guthrie family. That statement is accurate. It also requires context. CODIS contains DNA from convicted felons and arrestees in certain states. It does not contain profiles from members of the general public with no criminal history. If a person has never been arrested, never been convicted, their DNA is not in the system. Tomaso Chioni has no criminal record. His DNA is not in CODIS. This produces 2 completely different scenarios. In the first, investigators collected a direct biological sample from Tomaso Chioni, compared it against the crime scene DNA in a controlled laboratory setting, and the samples did not match. That is definitive biological exclusion. In the second, investigators ran the unknown DNA through CODIS, received no hit, and issued a statement that it doesn't match the family because none of them are in the database. One closes the question. The other resolves nothing about people outside the system. Law enforcement has not clarified which scenario occurred. Did investigators directly test Tomaso Chioni's DNA against the crime scene sample? And what were the results of that specific comparison? On February 3rd, Ashley Banfield's senior law enforcement source, trusted, known to her for years, with direct access to forensic results, witness statements, and surveillance analysis, told her Tomaso Chioni may be the prime suspect. On February 16th, Sheriff Nanos cleared the family. Banfield did not retract. Her source did not recant. On record, the source maintained their position after the public clearance. This was not a peripheral teepster. This was a senior official inside the investigation, someone who watched the 3-hour search, who watched evidence bags leave that home, who watched the department announce continued activity, and then watched a clearance issued 6 days later, and after all of that did not change their assessment. Sources can be wrong. They can misinterpret evidence. Those are real possibilities. But a senior law enforcement official with full investigative access, who held their position through a public clearance without recanting, that is a documented, sourced, unretracted claim that has never been publicly reconciled with the official statement. What did that source see that a public clearance did not answer? 7 details. Tomaso Chioni was the last confirmed person to see Nancy alive, and his alibi for the 41-minute critical window has never been publicly disclosed. The car he drove her home in sat in a forensic lot 10 days after his clearance, still part of the investigation. Investigators conducted a 3-hour search of his home with evidence bags and announced continued activity 6 days before issuing that clearance, with no public explanation of what changed. The kidnapper knew where every camera was and disabled them systematically, and Tomaso had been inside that house enough times to know the layout. The FBI's physical description has never been publicly reconciled with his profile. The DNA evidence does not prove what most assume, because the distinction between a CODIS search and a direct biological comparison has never been clarified. And a senior law enforcement source named him as a possible prime suspect and has not recanted despite the clearance. 7 details. 7 gaps between what the public was told and what the documented record shows. None of them explained. None of them closed. The counterargument is real, and it deserves to be stated. Sheriff Nanos, the lead investigator, the official with access to all evidence, issued a direct, unambiguous clearance. That is the considered position of the agency running this investigation. Tomaso and Annie cooperated fully throughout, consented searches, no warrants required, full access given. The family is offering $1 million, cash, anonymous, for any information leading to Nancy's recovery. Savannah announced it publicly, without conditions. Sheriff Nanos called the online speculation against the family cruel. If Tomaso Chioni is innocent, if he drove his mother-in-law home, said goodnight, and had nothing to do with what happened 4 hours later, then what he has endured is something no innocent person should have to carry. Both things can be true. The family can be innocent. The questions can still matter. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. Taken from her home in the middle of the night. No medication, no phone, no proof of life in over 30 days. The masked suspect is still unidentified. The unknown DNA has not matched anyone. Forensic genetic genealogy is underway. Results could take days, weeks, months. Her daughter Savannah said publicly, "If you have been waiting, if you have not been sure, let this be your sign to come forward. Tell what you know. Help bring her home." Savannah also acknowledged what the family may already know, that Nancy might be gone, that she might already be with her parents, with her brother Pierce, with the people she loved, but that the family needs to know. They need her to come home even now, even if only so there is somewhere to grieve. That is what is at the center of every detail in this video. Not a suspect, not a theory. An 84-year-old woman and a daughter who does not know where her mother is. There are 2 ways this ends. If Tomaso Chioni had no involvement, the evidence will prove it. His alibi will be documented and verifiable. A direct DNA comparison will exclude him conclusively. Whatever was collected during that 3-hour search will lead nowhere connected to him. Every question in this video will be answered and closed. If the evidence points in his direction, the 7 details documented here are a road map that was sitting in the public record the entire time. Either way, truth emerges. DNA does not lie. Alibis can be verified or disproven. Forensic evidence tells stories that cannot be rewritten. The car is still in that evidence lot. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. Banfield's source has not recanted. The clearance did not include the explanation that would close the questions it was meant to close. 7 details, documented, sourced, unanswered. When the DNA results land, when new forensic findings surface, when the next confirmed break in this case happens, it will be covered here with the same standard. Named sources, verified timelines, no speculation presented as conclusion. Subscribe so that when the answers come, you are here for them. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Her family deserves answers. And the record, kept honestly, is the best tool available until they arrive.